Welcome to episode 8 of the Never Board of Trade podcast, brought to you by the Brampton Board of Trade and from our amazing sponsors, the Brampton Honey Badgers. I'm Jaipaul.
I'm Vijay.
And we're here, as we are every other week, to talk about what's going on here in Brampton and how we at the Board of Trade are trying to make some sense of what's happening right now.
Yes.
And there's a lot, I think, this last week and a bit that we're trying to make sense of.
Yeah.
Would you say?
I would say so, yeah. And I think we're equal parts confused and intrigued. Is that fair to say?
Sure, I like that.
Yeah. It's interesting. First off, I'll just say, last night I had Badiali's.
Okay,
A friend of mine. Best pizza in Toronto.
Yeah.
And it was great. And
how long was the line?
So here's the trick, and maybe now that I'm saying this on the podcast, it won't be a trick. I always order ahead.
Okay.
Yeah, and I order a full pie.
Okay.
And skip the line, pick it up, and
pro move.
Yeah.
I have yet to try it because every time I want to go.
Yeah.
It's always it's like, oh, I'm nearby.
Yeah.
I should go. And it's normally a day like today is, which is like hot out and beautiful.
Yeah.
And there's a line like 40 people deep waiting for a piece of pizza.
100%.
So I've never had it because I've never been able to plan ahead for when I want it.
Yeah.
And worth the hype?
Oh yeah. I mean, I've had it several times now, and it's always
just rubbing it in.
Yeah. No. Because I always order ahead. That's the pro move. But no, it's delicious. They do something different with the crust.
Yeah.
But I say that because I have a little bit of bloat on me.
Okay.
From last
Are you self-conscious on camera today?
A little bit, yeah. So don't be alarmed if you're watching this. And then we had sushi as well.
Yesterday, yeah. For lunch, we had our team lunch, which was fantastic.
Immediately before Activate, which, that was a risky move, but we did it.
Everyone seemed to get through it okay, for the most part.
That's right. No, but to return to more serious moves. A wild week. And I think probably what we're going to be talking about, because it's sort of the elephant in the room, is there were a number of pieces of legislation that have moved through their respective legislatures or moving through their legislatures. And they have different implications on business, the business community, but they have their own controversies.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm hoping we could talk a little bit about that as well and see how to make sense of it.
Yeah, no, I would love to do that because it's very top of mind for me in particular because some of that legislation is provincial in nature. Yeah. And we're hosting the premier here next week.
That's right.
And we're going to have a fireside chat with some of the ministers who are part of the Brampton caucus here that form government. Yeah. And as a result, I'm trying to figure out how we navigate some conversation around these topics. Because and maybe we'll figure out a way to sort of maybe go through them each in turn. Yeah. But some of the legislation provincially, which has been passed, the federal stuff is still working its way through. The headline is that these are pieces of legislation. Bill 5 is what we're talking about here, that are very pro-business and very much responses to the very moment that we're in right now, where the need to drive economic growth and be responsive to what's happening from a tariff position and creating more more robust and resilient businesses here in Canada and in Ontario specifically, are all things that I think business members and members of the Board of Trade would want. And there are drivers behind this and things that this legislation will accomplish, such as the reduction of red tape. And we hear from our members all the time. One of the challenges that they have is the time and cost of just dealing with bureaucracy. So, on the surface, this sounds like a really great thing. And I think it will be interpreted initially as a very pro-business bill. Totally. How do we facilitate economic growth in economic zones that the province has identified, strategic sectors being developed in a way that makes business more expedient and more effective? However, the thing that makes that whole legislation go is not just the declaration of these economic zones, but the implication of what happens when something is declared an economic zone. Yeah. And that has real implications to the rights of those who are First Nations or Indigenous peoples whose land may be implicated. So we think about things like the Ring of Fire, but also to processes like environmental reviews, environmental assessments, Endangered Species Acts and things of that nature, which may have direct impact on even urbanized environments like the one that we live here in Brampton. Totally. And the ability of the province to basically bypass any of that legislative framework, and including municipal legislation in order to drive these projects through, I think has some real serious implications that I don't think people are talking about enough. And as I shared with the premier coming next week, I think it's our responsibility to make sure that we are engaging not just in the potential positive outcomes that I think the province is driving for here, but some of the very potentially serious implications of legislation developed in this way,
Yeah.
and in particular what it means for consultation. Hey there, just popping in, breaking up the sound of my own voice with the sound of my own voice to just do a quick shout out and thank you to the Brampton Honey Badgers for supporting this podcast. We really appreciate the work they're doing in our community, and we'd love to have you support them as well. They've got 3 home games coming up in the near future on June 14th, on June 20th, and on July 3rd. And it's a fantastic experience coming out to the Honey Badgers. They do a great job of in-game experience. And on that June 3rd game in particular, it's being hosted in collaboration with a number of business organizations here in Brampton, including the Brampton Board of Trade, the Downtown BIA, and the Business Entrepreneur Center at the city. So if you're a Brampton business and you're looking to come out and network and meet other members of the business community, make sure you come out on the July 3rd event. We've got a great activation planned. But in general, make sure you make the time. It's a great experience for you and your colleagues, you and your family, and show some support and help build some community pride for an organization that's working to do just that and supporting the great work we're doing here at the Brampton Board of Trade. So thank you to the Honey Badgers and thank you for supporting them.
Yeah. No, very well said. Very well said. And before we kind of dissect some of that, just for the audience, if you haven't seen,
yeah, sorry,
video,
I just drove right into it.
No,
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, because this is where exactly where I want to start. But for the audience, I did put together a video with Josh on explaining what Bill 5 is.
Yeah.
That's what we're talking about. Bill 5. It's a bill presented in the Ontario legislature. It has now received royal assent. But it seeks to create these special economic zones that Jaipaul's referring to. And in these special economic zones, a corporation, a business, or a person can be exempt from any provincial regulation or law, for that matter, or any municipal bylaw. And there are a couple projects are earmarked as a special economic zone. The Ring of Fire being one of them, which has been sort of in the zeitgeist in this province for a number of years now, and the 401 tunnel project, which we heard a little bit about at our Brampton in Motion symposium, among potentially other projects. But this, of course, has been controversial for a number of reasons. Environmentalists are incensed, particularly because much of their work can be sort of negated circumvented in some ways. The Endangered Species Act essentially repealed, but also a lot of controversy from First Nations communities that perceive this bill as abdicating a responsibility to consult with them. So agree with you that on the face of it, this can be seen as a pro-business bill. It's cutting quote unquote red tape, which frankly I'm getting increasingly frustrated by as a term, red tape, because I think it assumes that there's a lot that is considered red tape that frankly I don't consider red tape. Consultation is not red tape.
No,
example.
Absolutely.
And so I agree, and we'll talk a little bit about the ways in which we can expedite bureaucratic process. But I do think there is a defense of some of these processes when it comes to ensuring that there's meaningful consultation with First Nations communities, ensuring that we are protecting biodiversity in this province, and so on and so forth. We talked a lot about the first zoning bylaw coming into being during the 1970s, right? Before that, you could build a house right beside a polluting manufacturing plant, right? There are reasons why these things exist, but it's about striking that balance between industry and protections that frankly are exogenous to the private sector.
No, absolutely, and I think finding that balance is the tricky part, because I love how you touched on that, because you're right. It's really a framing device. What do we consider to be red tape? And so what is the necessary level of bureaucracy that we have to have in order to facilitate fairness, equity, safety, all these other elements, sustainability, versus what is literally, or what, sorry, not literally, what is more realistically tying the hands of business in the form of redundancy or in the form of overreach. And I think if you're a government that is looking to reduce regulation in all forms, red tape is a really easy term to use. It has a very easy visual metaphor, and no one's going to defend red tape. I think you're touching on something really important here. Is we need to define that which is overreach, that which there may be redundancy because of various levels of government, versus that which is really here to protect us. And I think the average individual, when you look at your life, will recognize, even the most libertarian of us, will say, or small government among us will say, there are certain things that we want the government to do. It's a continuum. And some people who want a lot of government in their lives and a lot of structure and are happy to have a taxation process that reflects that, and some want very little. But I don't think anyone is at that point where we say we're going to abdicate all of our need for a government to help manage and quite frankly to govern.
Yeah.
This seems to be one of those areas where we've not clearly defined where that line is between what is necessary and that which is not. And I think this government has put everything into the bucket of unnecessary, and therefore was able to bring through a bill quite easily with the majority that they have. So I'm not surprised it passed through the legislature. They have the votes to do that.
Yeah.
What I've been surprised by is the lack of outcry from the community, and we're seeing it from those in First Nations and Indigenous communities. We're hearing that outcry because they see the direct implication and impact it may have to their land rights, and really violating the spirit of treaties. But I think the average Ontarian has not understood or engaged perhaps in how this bill has potentially negative impact, and therefore we're not hearing a lot of voices in response. Environmental sector, for sure. I was at an event earlier today, and people that was bringing together people from sustainable businesses, and in that room, they clearly understood the implications. But I haven't heard it from any of our day-to-day members in the way that we hear about tariffs and quite frankly the need to reduce red tape and stop this the slowdown of government.
And to give the government its due, I think we're presented with a very serious problem around our competitiveness and productivity, and ensuring that we remain nimble, especially when we consider some of the threats from south of the border. However, this frankly transformative piece of legislation was never campaigned on, right? During the actual campaign, and to your point, the PCs they have enough votes to move this along and to allow it to reach the final point to receive royal assent. But that being said, I can't help but think about the fact that they received 43% of the vote. And they now have 100% of the power. And there are very few mechanisms within the legislature to actually challenge. I mean, that being said, the Liberals did do something interesting. They effectively filibustered the bill during, I believe, committee examination. But ultimately, that's the extent of what they can do. It's going to pass.
It's a moral victory at best.
Exactly. There's something that feels broken about that process. Right. And I don't know, but so
I do think there's a future episode where we just talk about electoral reform. Because this is something I'm passionate about, and I know it's something that you are actually active in. And I think it would be great to talk about what electoral reform means, because you're touching on something really, really important here. You have a government that garnered 43% of the vote with an election that only represented, I don't even think we have final numbers yet in terms of number of Ontarians that voted. But
a minority of eligible voters.
Unless there's something like remarkably different than previous elections, probably fewer than 40%, absolutely less than 50% of the population voted for it. So you really have a government that represents at best a quarter of the people that has 100% of the power, to your point. And so that being the case, there's a whole conversation to be had as to how that could work better. And it's not just about getting people to turn out and vote in larger numbers, although that's part of it. It's really about looking at the systems that are here in place.
Well, what do you think when it comes to Bill 5 specifically? And there are other bills, but I guess how do we deal with this problem of lagging productivity and a lack of competitiveness, let's say, with our duty to consult Indigenous communities and ensure that we are protecting the environment? What's that middle ground?
And I don't know the precise answer. I'm not and this is Jaipaul's manifesto, but I don't think those two things are mutually exclusive.
I agree.
And we know that if you want to move someone on a position, the first place you have to start with is where's common ground.
Yes.
And I think there's some common ground here, and you alluded to some of it already, right? I think we all can agree there's whatever that measure is, and different organizations use different forms of measurement. Some use the productivity gap, some use GDP straight up, But I think everyone can look around and say, hey, look, we've got more unemployment than we would like, and we're not as competitive as we would like to be. And what is happening down south right now is just shining a light on a bunch of stuff that's systemic and has been here in decades. The challenges we have in this province and the challenges we have in this country did not start because of Trump. Trump basically just pulled back a blanket on a bunch of things that we had hidden.
Exactly.
So it's great. We're working on some of that stuff. But we can agree their competitiveness needs to be worked on. It needs to be improved in this province. So that's some common ground.
Yeah.
I think we can also agree that consultation feels like some common ground because it's been interesting in as much as people are speaking out about the lack of consultation in the bill. One of the things that the government has insisted they will continue to do is consult. Yeah. Now, they don't have a requirement to consult. And I think that's where this gets a little bit dicey. Yeah. And they haven't said what consultation looks like. But they have said, but I think we have a couple pieces here we can work with. I think everyone agrees we want more productivity or growth or economic growth in the province. That's fair. Everyone can agree we don't want to be slowed down by unnecessary bureaucracy. Yeah. And I think even those who are in government agree that some form of consultation is meaningful. I think that's the basis of something.
Yes.
So
I agree.
Is to say doing away with a requirement for consultation altogether the right answer? I suspect no. Because even if we accept that this current government is acting with good faith and best intentions, and we've got the right ministers who are appropriately informed, we have no guarantee that future governments will be equally oriented. Yeah. And so we're opening up a potential Pandora's box there.
Yeah. That's a good point.
And the other piece I would say is that in as much as you're committed to consultation, which is wonderful, I think it's reasonable to say if you are really making a good faith effort for consultation, then everybody at the table needs to have equal access to information and up-to-date and accurate information. Yeah. And so, again, I think there's something to build on there. If we agree consultation needs to happen, then some level of analysis must have to happen so that we can at least agree upon, here are the facts that we're debating while we hammer out a solution. Yeah. So that's where I'd want to steer the discussion. Now, looking at, are there levels of like how much reporting is actually required? How can we make that reporting move more quickly? Yeah. You know, we've created an environment where many of our crown corporations have become very reliant on external consultants to deliver some of that reporting and analysis. In some cases, it makes sense because they have subject matter expertise. But is that an area that deems some analysis to say, are we hiring the right consultants? Do we have the right RFP process to get the right people in place? I suspect that some of these I'm not picking on anyone here, just the nature of that type of environment. Consultative reports are going to be have the potential, at the very least, to be predisposed to encouraging more consultation, because that's in fact how those consultants make their money. Are there ways where we can tighten up the process? Totally. Are there ways where we can clean up procurement to make these things happen faster? Yes. I'm not opposed to reducing red tape. No. But I don't think consultation is red tape. I think consultation is important.
Yeah. It's a blunt instrument, I think, to something for a problem that requires a more surgical solution. Yeah. And I think this is sort of the ideal role for the Minister of Red Tape Reduction, let's say. To act as an expediter of sorts. And this also speaks to some of the work we've been doing in our advocacy at the Board of Trade. And what comes to mind is the LRT as an example. The City of Brampton, city staff did a lot of good work around studying the two major design options. Yeah. And we've spoken to Metrolinx in the past around are there ways to speed up some of the due diligence work that has to be done, right? Do we need to take 2 years to restudy this project, or can we find ways to speed up this process? So essentially applying that lens to some of these major projects that like the Ring of Fire, for example.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think the other thing that's somewhat problematic in the legislation right now as well is that it gives the government. We've been using the Ring of Fire as a frame of reference, and then clearly that is it is going to be one of those economic zones, and all the conversation around this bill have talked about that specific piece, and so we know that to be the case. And there's others where if you look at the schedule of other acts that are being amended in support of this, there's a couple other ones it doesn't take a lot of tea leaf reading to figure out. Okay, Ontario Place is going to be one of them, and a few others. Yeah. I think one of the challenges I have here too is that it just sort of gives broad sweeping power to at any point declare an economic zone or economic interest zone, and therefore apply this legislation. I think with everything else we're saying, I would be a little more comfortable as well if this legislation was passed with defined economic zones. That would at least allow in the short term for there to be a process in place to say, okay, this is how we want to address it as it pertains to this project. Here's an approach that could work, and here are the stakeholders who need to be involved in this type of project.
Yeah.
But to do the broad sweeping legislation that not only gives the government the power to determine the how, but also into perpetuity the power to declare the what.
Yes,
I think that is a very powerful piece of legislation.
No, it is. And I think you're right. I think that's a good distinction. There's a difference between project-specific sort of exemptions versus the spirit of the bill, which is that it grants the government the ability to consider any part of the province a special economic zone. That is a very different thing, and frankly, that's something that will outlive the PC government. It will outlive Premier Ford, and to your point, a more despotic leader might use that in very different ways. So we kind of have to think about legislation and its implication on, or rather, the implication that a less charitable leader might abuse this.
Yeah, right? and we talk about this on occasion, right? Like it's important we be political but nonpartisan.
Yeah.
This is a political issue. I think it needs to be addressed. This is not it happens to be that this current government is the one that enacted this legislation. Yeah. This is not me going after this government. This is, I think we need to go after this legislation. Yeah, this government is responsible for this legislation.
For sure.
But to your point, even if we get every assurance and have every confidence and believe these as human beings can do everything right, you're enacting legislation that will be able to be, abused by others who come in the future. And that's, I think, a real implication. Whereas, so if you want to do this, like, I think we have to have some bumpers around it, some parameters around it. Yeah, guardrails. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Completely agree. Before we move on from the province, I also want to make mention of this. There's an article that came out in Trillium around the sort of breakdown of Go expansion.
Yeah.
And this is interesting because we heard that this agreement kind of fell apart.
Yeah.
And now the NDP is asking for the government to explain, and Metrolinx to explain publicly what happened here.
Yeah.
And a lot of our advocacy surrounds now Go 2.0 and all of that. I just want to make some time.
Yeah.
Any reactions to that?
Well, I'd love to hear your perspective because you've clearly read the article. I have a thought. I have some thoughts too, but you go on this one.
I think it's a real shame that we want to ensure that as we build out this province and folks are living further away and they're living in the suburbs, the broader region, that there's still connectivity to downtown, downtown Toronto, and connectivity between different communities, right? And it felt like for a while, at least last year with the Go expansion project, that we were moving towards a more European style rail system. Yeah. Unfortunately, that fell apart, for whatever reason. I think as taxpayers, there are millions and millions of dollars that have frankly been wasted now. I do think we're owed an explanation of what happened here, and how does Go 2.0 really differ?
Yeah.
And what are we doing differently? And frankly, what projects are kind of on the chopping block now? Yeah. Right. So I think this is a problem, and what I would say is on the topic of special economic zones. I mean, when it comes to public transit, I feel like that has been the perennial challenge of our country. Yeah. To build ambitious projects quickly and on budget. Yeah. So I hope as we talk about the Ring of Fire and all these things, I hope we can also prioritize rail.
So if zero pushback on any of those elements, I think. For me, it's challenging because in the nature of our work, we have colleagues, we have friends who work in some of these organizations, including Metrolinx, and I believe in the individuals who I know to be doing good work with the appropriate due diligence and the right intentions. But there is an organizational culture thing or an oversight piece here that I find really frustrating as a taxpayer, and for me it's on three levels, and I think you touched on two of them, and that is the millions and millions and millions of dollars that have gone into projects that has just been stalled and gone away and repivoted on, and with no accountability to where that money has gone and why it's been spent and why how to justify those, particularly at a time where, as we've talked on other podcasts, there's real dramatic needs for not just transit, but infrastructure investments in things like hospitals and highways and healthcare and investments, public education investments, university investments that the province is not able to make because we can't figure out how to get some trains to run through an urban area, which seems to me like a problem that every other place in the world has already figured out.
Yeah.
The second piece is what you're talking about, the transparency. Completely agree with that piece, which goes hand in hand with the money. But there's a frustration. Like, you spend the money poorly, even if I know how you spend it, that's still frustrating with the money as a taxpayer.
Yeah.
This sort of cone of silence that exists over these organizations, where we have no insight into how decisions are made, why that consortium fell apart, why certain companies are involved and sort of are able to have that continuity, and how these deals are being structured to come together, and what are the out clauses that we don't know about down the road that may similarly delay this project, is a frustration. And the fact that there seems to be no need or call out from the government for that transparency to be there for, again, an organization that we support as taxpayers. And then the third piece is this piece that feels to me, it's really hard, and I want to be careful with the language here, but it almost feels like an arrogance to say, we're going to deliver this project when we decide we're going to deliver this project. That it doesn't seem to me that there's any sense of urgency to bring this forward. And you started this section off, talking about that need for interconnectivity among cities and between cities, and the need for a network that has reliability and has service on a regular basis. Again, we talk about it all the time on this podcast. Just the challenge of getting from Brampton into downtown Toronto, which makes no sense at all when you consider how many people transmit back and forth to work on a daily basis. It's appalling and embarrassing. And the fact that we're just going to figure this out when we get around to figuring this out. The fact that we can't get ridership data, the fact that we don't have a timeline for these projects, and if we get a timeline, it moves back on what schedule, we don't know why.
No, exactly.
It just feels like an arrogance and a complete disrespect, and to the taxpayers across. But as someone in Brampton, I feel it particularly acutely.
100%.
It's really hard to see things like this and not feel like it's just an organization that does not care about the people who are relying on them to deliver a result.
I'm glad you said it. Thank you for sharing that. I
send all correspondence to Vijay, all your angry letters.
No, I'm really frustrated, particularly about two-way all day go and on the Kitchener line. We've heard, like, since I started this job, I've been hearing that two-way all day go's coming. The third track is coming. Just in a few months, in a few months. It is not coming. And now we're hearing about this potential missing link, the 407 corridor freight bypass. That was canceled in 2018, now being resurrected. What does this mean for additional tracks in the CN Halton sub that will bring two-way all day go to Brampton? We're trying to get ahead of that conversation. Stay tuned for some ideas there, and we'll be sharing some communication there. But there's so few answers, and I like you am extremely frustrated by this.
If I can link those first two topics we've talked about, and I know you want to talk about some of the federal stuff too before we wrap this up, but this is the one thing we haven't talked about, this Bill 5 piece that I think is interesting and potentially troubling as well. So let's talk about this for a second, the freight bypass here we're talking about. Without getting into all the details, we can do a whole other conversation around that one. And I know you probably have an article already ready to go if we haven't already put it out there. This is one of those things that has me a little bit worried that we aren't talking about, and that is the rights given within this bill for the province to supersede the regulations or any bylaws that exist within municipalities. And so when we talk about the stakeholders who have been excluded from this process, we've talked about Indigenous communities, we've talked about environmental organizations. But what this also has the potential to say, municipality, city, we don't need to listen to you. We have declared what's going to happen and you have to live with it. And this particular issue of the freight bypass is an interesting one, because this is actually one where the province's view on this and the city's view on this have not always been aligned. The LRT was another one of these, where what the province wanted, what the city wanted, wasn't the same vision. And it's one of the reasons it took so long to get to a final vision for it, was because the city had a point of view. And regardless of what your perspective on the city's point of view is, our city's supposed to have a point of view and should have it heard. And I'm really curious what the implications of Bill 5 are when, on one hand, this is a government that has granted first a small group, and now it feels like every city and town in the province strong mayoral powers, where you can cut through your own internal council and push through whatever you want, and then comes out later and says, oh, but by the way, we're passing legislation that allows us to ignore that mayor, and what does that mean when our communities often need solutions that address the nuance and the specific needs of our community? We do not have. I don't know how we're served by one-size-fits-all solutions across the province. And my fear is that we've removed this step of the consultative process. We're not just talking about those who are environmental stewards or those who are First Nations communities. We're also talking about those who we elect to represent our community. And they've effectively been neutered from this process as well. So when we start talking about things like the freight bypass, where I know there are many members of City Council who have strong opinions on how that should look, are they going to have a voice? We elected them to be our voice. I think that's going to be a challenging moment too.
This is an interesting question about our democracy as well. What is the role of municipalities and local democracy? And what seems like a common theme with this provincial government is that there is a sort of the issue of municipalities being creatures of the province is just being exacerbated. It seems with many of these conversations, and there are many examples of this. The MZO challenges as well is an example. The ministerial zoning orders, where essentially the province can override a local planning decision for their own purposes. It seems like this government is very comfortable with that reality that there is a subordinated position between the municipality and the province, and I'm very curious how municipal leaders feel about this, because it's effectively this government saying, city councils they're not government, they are administrative custodians of provincial mandate, right, and that is a. Personally, I think that's troublesome, but it's also it affects advocacy, right? It means that we cannot, as Brampton, as a municipality, we cannot plan our future for ourselves. We don't have a point of view. To your point, it is a provincial point of view ultimately.
So I think that's really troubling.
It is. It is, and particularly when we considered like some of our own policy resolutions at the Ontario Chamber of Commerce and at the Canadian Chamber of Commerce as well. We're talking about more revenue options for municipalities to be able to effectively plan. But if the province is saying, well, no, actually, we're going to be doing the planning for you.
I mean, give them credit. They know how to take advantage of a crisis, right? Whether it be Trump tariffs or lack of affordable housing, this government has utilized these real pressures. These are real issues that need solving. I'm not suggesting they're making these things up, and I'm not even suggesting that their end goal is a bad goal. Reduce friction, find ways to move things more quickly forward. Find ways to reduce inertia. But this sort of broad stroke approach they've taken. I really have an issue with the how they're doing this. But it's been really interesting that they have taken a crisis and turned it into an opportunity to really create a tremendous amount of power up in Queen's Park.
I completely agree.
So speaking of governments taking advantage of crises, like I did a segue. Let's talk about what our federal government's doing, because they're doing some similar stuff, and I would argue early days, not yet enacted legislation, but there are some bills working their way through right now through readings that I think have some real significant issues to the rights of people, not now just in this province, but across this country, in really, really significant ways that, again, seem to be under the radar, I think, of the average Canadian. So let's talk about that a little bit.
Bill C2 at the federal level, the first bill that was introduced by the Liberal government that was recently elected, introduced in the House by the Public Safety Minister, is well, first of all, an omnibus bill, which I have feelings about. When you travel in all these different.
There's no such thing as a good omnibus bill. It's impossible.
No, exactly. So there's that, but it's a bill that is, it's all about strengthening the borders. Supposedly, it's all about the 49th parallel and essentially acquiescing to Donald Trump and some of his concerns about the Canadian border, the U.S.-Canada border, and it's a little bit of, in my view, a little bit of grandstanding around ensuring that things are up to date and fortified and all of that. But nested within this bill are a number of subsections that are deeply troubling, deeply problematic. I use the term draconian.
Yeah.
It gives new powers to the government, to government staff, officials, to unilaterally alter immigration documents, to reject visas that have been obtained for reasons that are no more substantiated than there are pressures on our immigration system, and so this is necessary, right? There are provisions around refugee claims. So effectively, and this is also a retroactive decision, but if you have traveled to Canada and you've entered the country, and then several years later there is tumult in your home country, you cannot apply for refugee status in Canada.
That's right. You have I think 14 days to do it is the window.
Exactly.
And then that's 100% the implication. I came here on vacation. I have a visa for 5 years for tourist purposes because I made that application. And then I go back home and I face religious or persecution for my sexual orientation, whatever the case may be. The climate has now changed, and now when I come back to Canada as a refugee, you're not eligible anymore.
No.
Yeah. And as I read and I'm not an expert in this, and I know it's still going through some refining as well. Tremendous amount of power is in the hands of like the one bureaucrat who may look at your application. Exactly. There's not a robust appeal process. If you want to appeal, you have to leave the country to appeal. Like it really makes it difficult for someone to come here, and makes it really easy for someone who has a small bureaucratic error or some small paperwork error to maybe face real persecution, being sent back to their home country for reasons that traditionally have not been the way Canada has approached these types of situations.
And as we were talking about with Bill 5, we are very good at acknowledging the need to cut red tape when it comes to business, and simplify bureaucratic process when it comes to business. But what we're essentially doing with immigrants and with refugees is that we are adding further bureaucratic complexity. It cannot be on these individuals to navigate these increasingly complex bureaucratic landscapes. And what we're doing is we're saying, well, we actually don't care about that. We can add further complexity and therefore leave folks at the margins of society. That's a massive double standard. I mean, we understand human psychology when it comes to business, but we don't when it comes to immigration.
No, absolutely. And I think, and there is an intersection with the business piece though as well, right? So this is not, it is no less important if we only looked at it as a human rights thing. That alone is a reason to be outraged about this.
Absolutely.
But as a business organization, and just to backtrack one half step, similarly to our conversation around Bill 5, I see the problem they're actually trying to solve. And if I want to be a generous person and give everyone in government the benefit of the doubt, we have this gigantic backlog of cases of immigration application. My understanding is over 3 years. And so to process this giant backlog, they are looking for ways to expedite the process. And I think, to your point, some of it is some political gamesmanship as well, to demonstrate to the United States that we're taking a harder line on some of these issues as it pertains to their perception of our immigration process and the threat that these individuals may have to the United States. So I understand there are some valid reasons they may be doing this, but again, it's not the what, it's the how. And as a business organization, it's not just about the humanitarian implications of this. Again, not unimportant, but as a business organization, we look at it and say, look, we have a real need for newcomers into this country to drive our economy. We have all seen the data that show that if you take out the contributions of newcomers as employees and workers, skilled workers often in our economy, we are in a recession financially. If you take out the contributions of newcomers as in entrepreneurs and as job creators in this country, our economy begins to tank. And so this is not just some soft approach to say we need to be, the brand of Canada is to be good to refugees and immigrants. It serves us economically to be so. And in particular, where we are right now, where among the number one issues that we have as a country is the lack of skilled people to fill jobs. Totally. And so at the very time, and again, not diminishing the humanitarian part of it, but if you just say as a cold business person, look at this and say, we're adding bureaucratic complexity and we're making it harder for the very people who we need to drive this economy forward to get into this country, or quite frankly, what I really fear, even try to come to this country. Because I think the thing we don't talk about enough, and we've heard this when we talk to our colleagues in the post-secondary sector, where the Canadian government made it difficult for student visas to be obtained. Yeah. And now it hasn't resulted in just we have the same number of international students trying to come to Canada, but we're just accepting fewer of them. That absolutely is happening. We're accepting fewer of them. But if you talk to those who are in universities and colleges, they'll also tell you, we're getting fewer applicants. Yeah. Because they know Canada is not a safe place for us to come. No. Yeah. And so we're not even going to try to come to Canada anymore.
And there's a lot of public opinion polling as well in places like India and other countries that indicate
that basically said, So what is the long-term implication of this? Like you may be trying to solve a short-term problem with Donald Trump, and you may be trying to solve a short-term problem with a backlog of cases. But the implication over time is if you tell people, Canada is not really a welcoming place for newcomers to go. Well, where are they going to go? No, exactly. And will they go to the U.S.? Will they go to Germany? Will they go to other countries that may be more willing to accept them? And what is the implication to our society and economy over the long run? Again, it just feels like really short-sighted thinking, trying to solve with to use your analogy before, using a very blunt instrument approach to solve a problem that really requires nuance. Yeah, totally. And again, I think we just have we're back to where we were talking before. It seems like a lot of overreach and a lot of government intentions gone awry.
Yeah. And then the last piece about this bill in particular, and maybe not the last piece. There are many problems with the bill, and we just touched the surface. But this lawful access component of the bill, which is deeply troubling.
This has to be pulled out, because I think if people knew this alone, they would forget every other part, and this is the thing that people should be going and out in the streets about.
And it has been a conversation in this country for a while, a number of years now. But it effectively allows the government to request data from ISPs, request our data, right, without a warrant. Yeah. And this has nothing to do with the 49th parallel, nothing to do with ensuring that our immigration system is whatever. This has everything to do with our it's a civil liberties conversation at this point, right? So deeply troubling. And then related to this, on the topic of data privacy, and on the topic of sneaking things in that have nothing to do with the rest of the bill, Bill C4, which is the affordability bill,
middle class tax cuts.
Exactly, delivered by our finance minister. It sneaks in this sort of change to the Elections Canada Act that essentially exempts political parties from having to comply with provincial or federal privacy laws with respect to voter data. Yeah. Which is like, what are we doing here, right? Anyway, but and just caveat that bill also has not technically received royal assent or anything like that, so it will change.
But the lack of noise and the reality is, and I think you shared this with me earlier because you've been following this one a little more closely than I have, that there seems to be broad support across parties for this bill, because ultimately, who does it serve? It doesn't serve Canadians. It serves those who are political in office, regardless of whether you're formed government or you're in opposition. This helps you. Yeah. So why would they stand up for the rights of Canadians in this case? Because it actually benefits those who are seeking office to have access to that information.
Absolutely. And again, the same issue applies. The omnibus bill, the idea of sneaking in things that are irrelevant to the spirit of the bill. Yeah. The idea that we are not allowing these sort of monumental transformations to data privacy are not placed in a separate bill that are worthy of their own.
Yeah, where there can be discourse and debate. Yeah, that's right. That's right. Now they're daring the opposition to vote down a tax cut.
Exactly.
While sneaking through data privacy information.
And then layer on top of all of this the fact that there is a lot of tumult south of the border. New York City is having a mayoral race that is very interesting. It's a ranked ballot election.
Why they're having that mayoral race alone is very interesting. We don't need to get there. But
yes. Do
some Googling. It's crazy.
And we have a lot of friends who are sort of politically active. There's a lot of attention being paid there, but there are these bills that are going to radically transform the fabric of Canadian society, and I don't know what the reason is, but folks are just not paying enough attention.
Yeah.
And what do you think the reason for that is?
I think there's a whole bunch of things. I think American politics always sort of captures the imagination of Canadians in a different way.
Yeah.
I do think, however, it's just a lot of political fatigue right now.
Okay,
I think
that's fair.
We've just gone through 2 elections in this province at the very least.
Yeah.
And I think there's just I think people are just kind of tired of politics for the moment. And I don't think there's a reason not to have these conversations. But I do think that's among the reasons we don't have engagement. And then there's a whole other conversation to be had of where's the media on this? And who's calling this stuff out? Right? Yeah. We don't have that same access to media. We don't have the same voices of trust delivering this information.
Yeah.
How is the average Canadian even to know this is happening?
Yes.
So I think this always doubles down on this thing that you and I talk about of like the importance of organizations like ours to sometimes delve into these subjects, because if we can educate one more person, like that's a win. But I don't know who's doing the good work right now saying, hey, this is happening. Here's the analysis and here are the implications.
Yeah.
Outside of circles, like you talked about, and we both made reference. We have friends in this sphere. We talk to people. We know folks in these organizations. I think you and I are predisposed to knowing that these things are happening and having conversations with people, even casually, even just you and me, just working in the same office, where we have someone to talk to about this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I don't think the average Canadian understands how these things are direct impacts to them, and therefore we end up in these spots where these things slide through.
No, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right, and I am increasingly acknowledging the importance of democratic engagement between elections.
Yeah.
I think that is sometimes more important than engagement during elections, and it's because of these things. It's because I think we are getting to a place where our elected officials know that people aren't paying attention, and we don't have Walter Cronkites in Canada that can share this information readily, and so the folks can get away with it, right? Frankly, so I think it behooves us to ensure that we're paying attention to this and that we're sharing it with folks, and to the extent that we can, move the needle on any of this and convene a conversation or some sort of direct action of some sort. I think it's important, right?
Yeah. No, absolutely. And I think everything that's happened the last couple of weeks has served to justify some of the things that we're looking to invest our time in.
Yeah.
And maybe to wrap up this conversation for today. Just to share with those who, and if you've made it to the end of this podcast, thank you. We appreciate you being here. To know that we are planning exactly some of those conversations in the coming months.
Yeah.
So next week we are hosting the Premier. Doug Ford will be here in Brampton.
Yes.
So we're going to be making some remarks. I trust some of the topics that we'll be talking about will come up because we'll be speaking to a business audience, and I trust we'll be explaining why Bill 5 is good for businesses.
Yeah.
We will be having a bit of a fireside chat with some of the local ministers who comprise the Brampton caucus. Be an opportunity to speak with them about the implications of those bills, that bill rather, to Brampton and their priorities. So I think we have a really interesting conversation opportunity to start engaging in some of these topics. So if you can, please come out. The registration is on our website. But you and I are also working on a couple different projects heading into the summer. After we get through the Ford event, we have a sort of a natural lull that allows us to plan for the fall. We've got Brampton in Motion, which is a large summit that we had last year, a larger one this year, focused on issues around affordable housing, transportation. We're working on facilitating some discussions with our newly elected caucus members federally. We've already started some conversations with some of the provincial ministries about getting some of those individuals out here as well for discussions. So I think we're going to be doing a lot of the work that you and I have been talking about today. We're going to have chances to talk about it. I think we just need to talk about it maybe a little more urgently and perhaps a little more loudly.
Totally.
Seems to be the feeling right now, at least for me. I don't know how you feel about that part.
Yeah, and I completely agree. I feel like I don't want to be reactive or even responsive. I want to be proactive to what we've discussed in the past. But it just feels like this is such a critical moment to get ahead of some of these conversations. And I think we're also looking for collaboration on this too.
Absolutely. And I think maybe that's where to land it for here then. So if you have a desire to get involved, if you're part of an organization that has a point of view on these topics, reach out to Vijay and I. Let us know how we can work with you to start building on some of these ideas and build them into our advocacy and policy work. We will be heading into the Canadian Chamber AGM in the fall. It is an opportunity for us to start raising some issues of a national level as well, in the same way we did earlier on a provincial level. And really just start bringing these ideas forward. So if you'd like to get involved and engaged, let us know. Know that we're here to listen, and hopefully we'll hear from you soon. Finally, just want to thank you for listening. Thanks to the Brampton Honey Badgers for supporting it. They have 2 games upcoming later this week on June 14th. They've got a home game here in Brampton. And on July 3rd, they have their business and basketball event, which we will be attending on behalf of the Brampton Board of Trade, the Downtown BIA, and the Business Entrepreneur Center. So a lot of businesses coming together for that particular game. So if you haven't checked out the Honey Badgers yet, please make sure you do so. And come out on the night that we at the Board of Trade will be there, and we'll have a great time together as well. And with that, we'll see you at the next podcast.
Thank you.